Oh, all right. So, Jasmine, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Victoria Bortle. She is a documentation manager at Coupa Software, and I'm going to run you through her bio really quickly. Victoria works remotely at a Silicon Valley fintech company as documentation manager. She has nearly 20 years of editorial experience, including persuasive SEO copywriting, UX design, video tutorial production, customer-facing documentation, and content strategy. She holds a BA in history from Smith College with additional coursework at the University of California, Riverside and the University of California, Berkeley. And on a personal note, having worked with Victoria, she is wonderful and you are in for a fantastic talk today to fully embarrass you. So, what we will be discussing today is leadership in the documentation space. This can take many different forms, many different styles, and we're going to walk through different experiences that we've had. And this is going to be a very participatory discussion. So, please bring your experiences, what you've seen, what you're curious about as we talk through some of these topics. So, without anything else, this is Victoria, and please take it away.
Oh, thank you, Jasmine. That was really, thank you. I'm very humbled. I feel like I need a moment, and she really should have set the bar a little lower for me. So, um, I'm actually really looking forward to hearing other people's experiences too. So, chime in as you like. I'm gonna share my screen here.
Perfect.
How is that? There seems to be, it's showing some, pardon me. And Jasmine knows I'm pretty terrible at this. There we go. Okay, I think I've gotten the screen now. Can everyone see something that says leadership and advocacy on the screen?
I can
Yes.
see it.
Oh, excellent. So one of the things that I was thinking about while putting this together were the different obstacles I faced when trying to build, grow, and advocate for a technical writing team. And it's really struck me. To me, it seems very obvious what our value is. Whenever anyone opens a package for anything nowadays, our work is front and center. You can't operate a toaster without seeing, right, the little leaflet that shows how to plug it in, other things. So I've taken note as to what are the obstacles I've faced in trying to get others to understand this is what we do. This is why we're important for your organization. This is how we can not only save you money, but make you money. I've found that a lot of it is through education, building relationships, and other things. So I've when Jasmine asked me about this topic, I really thought about all those experiences, the different conversations I've had, and the different questions I've answered over the years. We went over this. All right. So one of the things that I've really observed, especially with younger companies, startups especially, but I find I'm currently working at a mid-sized company, 3,000 to 4,000 folks. And I'm seeing too some of the same things of just kind of I don't want to say ignorance, but there is, I mean, in some ways, some folks are ignorant about us. So, as tech writers, one of the things as a leader that I'm looking out for is to making sure that I want to ensure that people understand the true accounting value we bring, but there's also a perception that I want to share, or I want to exhibit and make sure that people see us in a certain light. I want to be kind of a PR spokesperson for the team too. So when I come into an organization, one of the things I really look at is where have they assigned us within the company? Sometimes it can be IT, engineering's pretty typical, a product team. But then there's some odd ones like a human resources department or, a general operations department. I've been in all of these different groups. So when I think about that and I think about where the docs team lives in a company or organization, I also think about, okay, how do I align with those values so I can really win folks over, or really say, emphasize how we are part of these goals and really tie it into that. I'm trying to think, I've got little notes here. So yeah, when I was working assigned to an operations department, it was so broad. So I really tried to hit up the COO and other people that I recognized that he trusted in the organization to find out what are the values this person has, what are they looking out for, and trying to create things or you present to groups and others, or just casual interactions, chatting in the hallway, or casual emails or instant messages where I can, pepper in like part of those values and how tech writers are really, we're really aligned with that. We see that, we understand, we have that awareness. Another thing too is to kind of understand the playing field is to look at is technical content and that delivery, is it part of their business processes? Or do I have to kind of fight to get my way into meetings, to be part of, wait, don't send that out yet. We have to write something so that end users or customers or developers, so that they know how to use this stuff that you're making. It's been really surprising to see, especially at younger companies, they don't think about this. It's an afterthought, or, we design it so well, we don't need to worry about any sort of documentation. And that just makes me go cross-eyed, because that's never the case. And you always see problems like when there's not enough documentation or not enough instruction to help the users along. Another thing I like to look at is, how hard is it for us to get basic things? I worked at a company where I asked, hey, can I get copies of the Chicago Manual of Style for the team? And I was rejected. Seemed like a simple, straightforward expense, but it really informed me, okay, they don't understand. I've got to win some folks over. I've got to make some friends. I've got to build some alliances to convince or to show, right? Demonstrate, convince, persuade, whatever I can do to make them understand, this is what we do. This is why we're part of this organization. That's why we're here. And these are things that are going to help us serve the greater organization, serve the department, serve our customers, clients, what have you. And another thing that kind of informs me about how an organization, how a company understands its tech writers, is I really listen for the kinds of questions we get. So if I'm hearing a lot of, oh, I've never worked with a tech writer, what do you do? Hearing that here and there is natural. A lot of people are, meeting us for the first time. But if I hear it a lot, and especially with people who are supposed to be higher up in the organization, that's when I get kind of alarmed, because, I've got to teach folks about, this is what we do. Here's how we bring value. Here's how we protect an organization. Here's how we protect what people are doing. And just kind of makes me think, how elementary do I start off with? Or how advanced can I have? Can I bring like new ideas and tech writing and documentation value? How do I shape that conversation? How do I talk to these folks on their level? So, right, what we do, getting to know your audience, if you will. So, yeah, that's part of this general thing of understanding the landscape. So, how are we being perceived right out of the gate? And then, that will give us a sense of, where are we? And then, well, what are we doing here? And do we have what we need? So I'm just kind of curious if there are, and pardon my nerves, I'm a little shaky. Is there kind of other ways that anyone else has experienced in their own companies where they've had to like understand the landscape or get a sense of, do they know what we're doing here? How do I figure that out? Or determining, do you have to do a lot of advocacy, a lot of legwork, if you will, to make sure that your team is protected and not forgotten about or siloed or left to the side?
Well, I'll tell you in my experience, and my last, or my next to my last position, I was the only tech writer in a small startup of about, well, it was about 20 people when I joined, and about 40 or so when it went out of business, about 3.5 years later. But I I sort of just made my own role there. I made it my purpose to foster a culture of communication, and all of the people there were very much open to that, because they all believed in communicating what they were doing, talking about it, documenting things, explaining things. So it really just fit right in. And I had to understand it was a robotics company, and we were doing some complex robotics things involving artificial intelligence and machine learning and a few other things. And so I had to learn and distill essentially what it was we were doing so that we could explain it to people on the outside. And so I worked a lot on that part of it. So I don't know. I'll stop talking.
Oh no, that's great. And really, I kind of asked that too, in case because down the road, this won't be. I think at every company, I'm going to have to do this kind of work. Whereas, understanding the playing field and figuring out who can I partner with, and who are my biggest critics, and how can I convince them that you really want to have a good, healthy documentation team. You really want to make sure that your tech writers are involved.
Yeah, I agree, Victoria. Something you said struck me really hard when I think about my past experience. You asked, asking yourself, how advanced can the conversation be based on where that organization is? And my first, like right out of college position was again at an acquired startup. They'd never had a tech writer, was responsible for introducing a lot of process into their development cycles. And I came in so excited and so green and so ready to go. And my conversations were at the academic level. I'm like, let's talk about, audience analysis. And I remembered someone stopping me and being like, what do you mean by audience? Or what do you mean by writing for someone? And I was like, oh, okay. And then had to start leveling at that sort of entry point. So I think that's really important. As you mentioned too, at every organization, you're going to have to manage and navigate those stakeholder relationships, and stakeholders are always going to be at those different levels. So it's a really good reminder that that's just an ongoing process that we're mindful of.
Victoria, I don't know if you can see that Sabahat has his hand up.
Oh, forgive me.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to be politer than usual. Excuse my background noise. I loved how you broke this up, because I've always, or rather, I've often worked as an individual writer or in very small teams. And at that level, it's part of going into any tech writing job, I like to say, is first you've got to try to understand the 3 or 4 dimensions of tech writing, what the subject matter is, what the team's like, where, like you said, where are we in the organization, and then what kind of language are we using, and then what the tool chain is. And then I come to trying to understand the team. And as an individual contributor, it's about understanding individual members of the team or the team and seeing what works best in terms of exchanging information. I like to say, some people will give you a full-blown functional spec. Others will want to sit down over coffee and explain it to you. Yet others will have emails and other things. But the other thing at the management level, or at the trying to manage an advocate level, is that layer of culture. right? Now, I know that gets, it gets a little vague. I don't like it in general conversation itself, but in organizations, trying to understand, I think this connects to what, I'm blanking on the name again, what Jasmine was saying a minute ago, trying to understand what the culture of the organization is. Who are these folks? Are they hardcore engineers that believe documentation is basically just a typing job or shouldn't exist? Or is this a more evolved organization? And then, of course, ethnic and engineers have their own culture. People from certain parts of the world, engineers of certain parts of the world have their own culture. So that aspect of trying to understand the culture is, I guess it wasn't pulled out formally, so I thought I'd mention it because I worked for one semiconductor company, Fabless Semiconductor, which became very big, went public, was sold for $1 billion or three twice. But the founding CEO basically was an Indian gentleman. We share community markers, but he was someone who just believed that tech writing is something I should just pay $15,000 a year to someone in India to do.
Yeah.
And that actually kind of guided and informed how tech writing was seen throughout the organization. The organization founded by two South Asians based in Silicon Valley, and yet they had decided, no, we can't do tech writing in India. And they weren't ready to spend money on tech writing. So that ended in a paradox that created, and all this came from the culture of the founder. That kind of insight is often, cultural and individual and all that. Just thought I'd throw that.
Oh, and I'm so glad you did. Thank you. And that does compound the complexity. And my current company is actually the first one that is very global. And so I have teammates that are located in Germany. I work with developers in India. I work with a developer in the Ukraine, or excuse me, in Ukraine. And so yes, those cultural cues actually are very important, and especially now that we're in a remote and hybrid environment, right? That those written communications are different based on culture, location. So, and those are also important cues that I'm picking up on. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you.
By the way, it's not just companies led by Indians who feel that way. Most Silicon Valley companies went through a period back in the early 2000s when they all wanted to send their tech writing to India.
Oh yes, absolutely. And like I said, one very important basic culture all of us always deal with is the culture of engineers. And that, I will tell you, I've worked in a couple of free countries. I will tell you that is independent of geography and history and ethnic background and engineers in a lot of these aspects. And in fact, I'm talking about the opposite. And yeah, at one point, Cisco basically just shut down their whole tech writing. They didn't have a single person, I believe, with the designation of tech writer.
Yeah, and that's always felt very, very threatening to me. I mean, not only because this is my discipline, but there's this interesting kind of it's a controversial viewpoint where some believe that it's more important for someone to have an engineering background as opposed to an editorial writing background. And so when I see even job listings, job boards that say, must have an engineering background as opposed to an editorial one, I'm kind of relieved that they will be upfront about that, because I don't want to have to combat that bias going in the door, or having to be in an interview and having to explain, or right, trying to convince them, or argue a point that is going to be really contrarian to what they're already believing. So yeah, thank you. And then you also mentioned too about I can't quite remember how you put it, but something how we're just stenographers or typists. and I see nodding heads, and actually it would be cathartic for me to hear from others on this, because I worked at a company where, I kid you not, for 6 months, they had me taking meeting notes, meeting minutes. And they perceived me as a court reporter, and I wasn't sure if I should take it personally, or is it really the bias and misunderstanding of others about what my role actually is, and what knowledge and experience I bring. And it was, when you're in there, right? I was a contractor at the time. I needed the money. It was a well-paying gig, but I really felt belittled and confused. So, I see some nodding heads, and I wonder, have others experienced that, where you're considered somehow a glorified typist, or like a court reporter?
Well, there are two aspects of that, we have one person who comes, one of our now retired tech writers, who says she always wanted to take the minutes at the meetings, because she wound up controlling the agenda and controlling the information and controlling what got reported from the meeting and what didn't, and that she felt it was very important to how to be at the center of things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's a double-edged sword, right? As Victoria mentioned, it can be belittling and putting you in a box, especially, of course, if you're a woman, then there's another layer to it. But on the other hand, one, on a good day, if it works well, could leverage it the way you're mentioning, Roger, that, sorry, Richard, that if you are able to do that, navigate it in a way where you're able to show that it's a useful function for someone with some communication chops to be in charge of things that involve communication without it seeming like a typist's job, then it's dicey, but it can be done. But again, like you said, in Silicon Valley, that's often not where we're starting. So it's a bigger, heavier lift than it would be in some other culture.
And then Maria, I think I see your hand raised.
You do indeed. And how many more slides do you have? About
I believe just about 5. I mean, it's very simple.
okay, so there, I do have a couple of minutes I can talk for then, because I've got a lot to say on this topic. I didn't want to be the cause of missing your presentation because I'm out here pontificating. I'm one of those retired tech writers. As I see the people that I know that are on the screen, a lot of us would probably fall into that category. And I'm sitting here wondering why this is still the case. What does that say about the profession, that people are still experiencing these problems and these issues that are like decades old? Okay, yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's enough for me to say on that. I think.
Okay. Well, I don't feel so alone, and I appreciate all of you for saying this, because I really have, my mind has really noodled on this for quite some time, and I've never quite put it in a good context, and hearing from all of you really does put my mind at ease that it's nothing I should take personally. This is something that actually, and Maria, it sounds like, to your point, this has been a long issue with our discipline.
And it's not.
If I may just say one more little thing, Patrick, sorry, to answer Maria's question, I think it actually got worse in the middle, and we're actually in the process. What you're describing, Maria, is a bad situation which kept getting worse and worse, and till we hit rock bottom. Again, my my touchstone is the fact that Cisco, one of our largest organizations, actually did away with all tech writers. And now we're actually in the process of digging out of that. So things, it got worse before it got to where we are. Sorry, Patrick.
No, that's fine. What I was going to say is it's not just inside of industry. I just read an article, in fact, a couple of articles, and in the universities, the number of people that are going into the English departments and going into the humanities has absolutely crashed. And over the last 10 years or so, they're seeing, 25 to 50% of the people that would have enrolled, 10 years ago. So departments are beginning to try to figure out whether they're even going to have an English department anymore. And what is on fire is the STEM fields, and there's been so much pressure to put people into engineering and consulting and mathematics and those fields, which are all great things for people to study. But it's come at the cost of history and the humanities and the English departments and whatever. And so it's not just inside of our companies that are devaluing, what we do. The schools themselves are having a hard time trying to figure out how to justify even having an English department. It's, incomprehensible to me, but I don't know.
Well,
We're all wrestling with it.
Patrick, that is largely, I think, because of the cost of higher education, the way it has changed recently, and
Yes.
and it's just there's no payback if you want to, unless you're rich. Getting an education as an English major is a losing proposition.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. If high incomes are the only goal of education, that's the problem.
Well,
But the thing is it's go ahead, Richard. I was going to comment
no,
on that too.
I was just going to say it's not the only goal of education, but when the price gets so high that only the rich can afford it, well then.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And I would also say, yeah, I mean, if schools cost at least $15,000 to $50,000 a year, I understand. I was an English major and I don't regret it at all. And I had a scholarship. I wasn't independently wealthy. I don't regret it at all. But if I were going to go back now, I don't know. Because when I went to school, we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would be extremely enticed, because I don't think that an English major is a losing proposition. I wish everybody had one, because I think the quality of our existence would be higher, but and better civic communication. But it's a beginning thing. Like, it humanizes you, but how often can you use those skills right out of school? Whereas if you have a computer science degree, you're immediately hireable. Whereas with an English degree, there are, like, you could be an English teacher. Like, it's a foundational degree is the way I see it.
Yeah. On the other hand, interestingly enough, they also discovered that the people that did have English degrees, or not just English degrees, but humanities degrees, often wound up at the heads of their companies. In other words, you might have a hard time getting started, but the people that had developed good communication skills early on, and some luck and the rest of it, sometimes managed to climb the ladder within their organizations a lot better than, engineers and other people that couldn't communicate.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's true, but it'd probably be just proportionally not enough CEOs. There are only so many CEOs.
Yeah, no, I totally understand it. That the English departments are trying to scrape around, trying to figure out something they can hold out to their prospective students.
No, it's very tough.
But we're in a position where we're fighting to try to defend the value of critical thinking and and the ability to do research and the ability to communicate. And we're living through a very strange time.
Yeah. Also, when everybody's
All right, give Joe just a second. Let Nikki say something because she's had her hand up for about 10 minutes.
okay.
Okay. I wanted to point out that the field of quote unquote technical writing has split into people that are more like me that are into usability, and people who are more like Richard, who is, he's a developer, who does API documentation, and for that, an engineering background, is not a bad thing. For me, I'm just wondering, encountering designers, it seems like UX designers get some respect. So I was wondering, just asking our speaker here, what has been your relationship in showing how you're helping with the with the design process and how you're essential to it? Because no matter what they say about, oh, it's so easy, we don't need documentation. Well, you still need UI text. You still need tooltips, all that sort of thing. Okay. And you need to do the research to make sure that you've got your audience right. So I was wondering where, just comment, as I said, my first thing is about API documentation, which Richard knows about, but I'm talking about more the UX type of thing. If you would care to comment on that, thank you.
Oh, definitely. And I'm biased because I started my career actually in marketing as a persuasive copywriter, and I have attended seminars. I've met Jakob Nielsen, who runs the Nielsen Norman Group, which their expertise is in UX. Very nice gentleman. He signed my book. Very, very nice. So when I come in and I meet a new group, I kind of force myself into the conversation and say, oh, by the way, I have this background. I understand the nuances of, we have a few characters to communicate a lot of information. Please rely on me as much as possible. I'm welcome to it. And what I try to do is also sell the concept of standardization and getting them familiar with the concept of a new end user will be more confident using your tool, your service, what have you, if they can follow a breadcrumb trail or a set, what I call a set trail. So if they read marketing collateral and, okay, I understand a concept, and if they see that same terminology right in the UX, on the UI, okay, that makes sense. I'm on this page, I'm still following this concept, I understand. And then they look at my documentation and they see that same terminology, right? That consistency, that standardization. And that's what I try and explain to folks who might be new. Some of them are relieved. Others, if I notice some defensiveness, then I'm wondering, okay, I might have someone who's territorial, someone who's building an empire. Let me see if I can work with this personality. In my current role, we are really creating a partnership actually with our UX department to make sure that we work with each other and help uphold editorial standards, but also standards to help our end users and make sure that they are getting the most out of the entire experience. If that makes sense, Nikki, I don't know.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that the point, what I call the cardinal sin of technical communication, is using the same term to mean two different things. I actually once worked for a company and we control the terminology, the vocabulary. That's extremely important. Or the second worst is using different terms for the same thing. So they need to communicate with the users. You have to control that vocabulary. So thanks.
Yeah. And from the pre-sale side, the marketing side, it's gotten really tricky because there's search engine optimization, SEO, copywriting, where you get more value if you have varied terms for the same concept or the same entity. And it really flies in the face of what we're trying to do, which is to provide consistent information throughout an experience. So trying to marry those two, trying to reconcile those two things has become really interesting.
Yeah, I hope we're not holding you up for the rest of the presentation, but I just did want to throw in a word in support of that, that often one of the ways to start making connections and alliances across an organization is to start advocating for things like that. Because I've had to actually push all the way up to the executive level for ownership of certain brands and names and things like that. At the same time, trying to reach out to marketing and say, okay, I've had several places where I've had to say, this can be said like this or this. I want you to make a decision because I don't own this. I want you to own this thing, and I'm here to support you and implement what you decide. Which, it's hit or miss, right? Sometimes it can come out as positive and helping and supportive and therefore help build good relationships. And other times it can seem like stepping on people's toes. So hit or miss, but that's one of the avenues.
Good call out. Oh, I think I see Rose's hand.
So I was going to say one more thing is I'm wondering if some industries, it's easier to justify your existence than others. I've largely worked in healthcare organizations with a software component, and the FDA requires the existence of documentation. So I feel that that is really helpful. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. There's no way to prove things. So that's one way to work with that. Maybe look and see maybe look at other industries, fintech or whatever it might be, and see if there are other regulations that require certain types of documentation. Then you could say, look, this is a government mandate. This needs to exist.
I love this. Yeah, I love this chat. I'm sorry to cut you off.
About pamplemousse or about
but
distracting.
What you're saying about policy and compliance. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's such a huge part of healthcare is that you have to have the documents in place, and you can get dinged. You can get something called a 483. You can have those things happen. But one thing I argue as a writer is I create document infrastructure. I create inspection readiness. I ensure that we are ready for inspection. So I just try to find higher concepts to explain what I do versus I write and I edit.
Yes. Yeah. And I hope I don't lose the respect of anyone by revealing this, but previous to moving into fintech at my current company, I was in the cannabis industry, which is very highly regulated. I became, speaking of building relationships and finding your allies, I was, when I first entered the organization, I was quite lost. I felt very siloed. People really didn't understand. New people in the industry, some folks coming from non-professional backgrounds. And, I was kind of lost until I met with some members of our legal team. And the legal team at this company was massive because they're constantly trying to protect the whole organization. There's a lot of policy, especially in California. When I started in the cannabis industry, it was before marijuana was for adult use, right? You still had to have certain medical credentials in order to access it. So we were, lots of SOPs, legal had to clear everything. And that's when I finally found kind of a safe way of protecting my team, was aligning very closely with the legal team for, Rose, exactly the points you were saying, to protect the organization. And in fact, we were building out a library of SOPs for our sales team. And as part of our writing and review process, we baked into it that it would go to legal and compliance for review before publishing. And they caught a standard practice that the sales team was doing, where for training or other purposes, they'd have another person listen in on a line. In California, if you don't disclose that somebody else is on the line, it's called wiretapping, and it can cause a lot of legal problems. And so when we sent this SOP draft, just another day of the week for us, sent it off to legal, it set off a firestorm internally because our legal team said, whoa, 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 our sales folks are like, the sales floor is doing this repeatedly, many times a day. Okay, we have to stop this immediately. And so when the CEO, the owner, got word, right, that this whole kerfuffle got kicked up, but it was, right, the technical writers who brought forth this issue, who surfaced it, saved him a lot of money that he wanted to put in his pocket. He didn't want to have to pay legal fees. That's when we started to win friends, and the value of technical writing really started to get known. So yeah, great point.
And it's interesting because you were talking about what department should we be under? Maybe in some cases we should be under legal.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is about legal documentation, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tried to push for that, but it got politically got a little weird. So we're like, okay, let's not make too many waves.
I get it.
So did I miss anybody else?
Oh, one more thing, because this is just such an interesting topic, is another thing that I emphasize that I do is I also crystallize and document processes. I create process maps, which are actually part of Six Sigma, if you know about that, in terms of how you run manufacturing in the best possible way. So process maps basically graphically represent a process, and then I'll have the written process as well. And so I basically say, I let you guys, I listen to you and I reflect what you're doing now, and then I develop the process if it needs gaps to be resolved, if there are repetitions, if there are missing steps. And in that way, we actually reduce waste and are more efficient and make the company more money, because we're not reinventing the wheel over and over as well. And you can cut down on training. So these are the things that I say.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. That we could have put this whole you know what, we can skip these slides.
No, it's okay.
The points that we're organically bringing up are what I've already
but let's see them.
Yeah.
So
all right. So you're in charge, Victoria.
I hope it's going okay. So, but yeah, this quote I really like, because it really, and the story about Cisco basically, taking down its entire documentation department really highlights there's going to be debt that your company is going to have to pay if you don't have this documentation, if you don't provide it, if you don't keep it up to date. It's just when that debt comes due, like, when is it? Is it going to be sooner or later?
Well, and the question is, which is going to be higher?
Right.
The later costs tend to be higher.
Yeah, especially in the accessibility world, where retrofitting is always going to be more painful than designing. So,
and and this slide was right. We're just naturally coming to this very thing where how we build relationships and alliances, documentation across other departments, to kind of protect, right, either user experience or integrity of the software, or just how end users move through things and can get things done. So yeah, as Nikki was saying, UX, and I didn't put it in here, but Rose, like, aligning with legal and compliance. So what's great too is if you can join up with another department, if you can align your tech writing team with another team, what are the values that the two groups share, right? As what's the overlap, and how can we uphold those values? How can we defend them together? And how can we work together and collaborate and coordinate, or give each other a heads up? As a manager, I really look out for other managers and other departments to give each other almost intel, if you will, of, hey, I'm hearing word about this, or this change is coming. Have you heard anything? Or, right, scuttlebutt, your water cooler talk. Like, how can we keep each other informed, and just to make sure that our teams are protected, and that we are ready to we're not going to get blindsided by something. Keeping each other informed and really just, to protect the team and also the quality of what we're doing and to uphold like the values that we're going to share.
Do you find that this water cooler kind of thing is harder with remote employees?
I do. Yeah. It's having worked in an office, it's much easier to encounter a new person or to strike up a conversation, pouring a cup of coffee or getting, a snack from the break room or waiting in line for lunch or this and that. It has to be more deliberate and conscientious in a remote environment. And what's tougher is you have to assume that your company can read and hear everything. So you can't have maybe honest chit chat when your instant messages are probably being read. Every email is being seen, and even video conference calls. I make jokes with my team members about, oh, Big Brother is watching us, or hi NSA, how's it going? We make that joke, but it's funny because there's a little bit of truth in that, and there's a little natural concern because the things can be very, very well monitored. So yeah, I do find it harder in a remote environment. One of the things that's been hard for me, but with maturity and experience, I've gotten better at it, is embracing my critics. Some of the biggest and most memorable things in my career are when I can take someone who is a vocal, maybe a opponent almost, someone who doesn't understand what a tech writer does, doesn't respect the work of a tech writer, or believes that they can do it better when they've demonstrated that they can't. If I can convince that person otherwise, I feel like it's the biggest victory ever. And when I can win them over and change that relationship and make it do a 180, I can actually get a lot of insight from that person if I really listen, because it helps me build a stronger argument for someone who might be an even bigger critic down the road. So sometimes I really have to grit my teeth, but if I can evaluate the situation and kind of get an understanding too of what are they personally trying to achieve, then it can make me kind of break down, okay, here's where their mindset is, here's where they are. Let me see how I can work with them or get beyond this or somehow break through that kind of maybe armor or mindset that they've held fast to.
Agreed. And I think too, sometimes they become your biggest advocates in a very weird way because they've seen that personal buy-in and seen you bridging gaps and solving their needs. And I've seen that a couple of times in my work, and it's always surprising because that initial reaction is, oh, I do not like this. This is unpleasant. It's uncomfortable. But having that open, almost vulnerability and willingness to think creatively and solve those problems is really valuable in building a lot of what we've talked about during this conversation.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, there's and some of the ways that I can break through, sometimes the personalities clash. And that's when I really look to cold hard facts and data analysis to say, okay, maybe we can align in a different way. If we look at what are the KPIs or what kind of goals does this other person need to meet? Are we perhaps pointed at the same goal and the same metrics are being measured for our work? Okay, there's common ground there. Let's see if I can work with that. And data and metrics can really help if you're in what's called I call it a mushroom management environment, where you might be, Richard, I see you smiling, when you're kept in the dark about things and you're fed garbage and you don't get a lot of insight and everyone's, being kept in the dark about things.
Garbage is not the word they usually use in that.
I think we're being recorded, so I want to keep it clean.
We are being recorded.
So happy International Women's Day. I had to throw in a quote from Dolly Parton, who I greatly admire and enjoy her films and music. So she has a phrase, or she says something in a movie called Steel Magnolias, where she says, "There's no such thing as natural beauty." And I love this quote because I do think it's applicable to technical writing. And I think of the way I think of it is when I'm putting together proposals or team reports or something, I think about this quote in terms of what is it I want others to see? And beauty, right, is a subjective thing depending on how, right, how you can use like makeup, cosmetics, right? You can paint things in a certain way. So, or you can, painters, photographers, they will shape perspective to have you see something from it with a certain viewpoint. And that's what I think about when I hear this quote or think about this quote. So, as technical writers, we use words, data, and partnerships to help shape those very things and how we are perceived and how they understand our value and what we do.
One thing Dolly Parton says is, it costs an awful lot to look this cheap.
Yeah, I always loved that one.
Oh, Rose,
You wouldn't believe what it takes how much it costs to look this cheap. I think it is.
She also said it took her, well, just like regarding her recent album, she said, I had to get really rich before I could sing like I was poor.
Wow. Wow.
It's just to say Appalachian folk songs. She also said that. So, but one thing I also see about this quote that I think is interesting is it's like it's like natural beauty looks easy because it's natural. And maybe with writing, it's clean and clear. It must just fall out of the sky like that. You don't see the 18 revisions that came in advance.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you make it look easy, right? It's like a blessing and a curse because it's simple. Oh, this iPhone, they must have just thrown this together in 3 hours. It's so straightforward. But it's like, how many revisions and changes did they make?
After you've used it and cursed it a few times, you don't think that anymore.
Just as an idea of what simplicity is. I don't have an iPhone, but.
Yeah, and perhaps, we have inadvertently caused our own problems, right? Because our work is so good, it looks easy. So anyone says, oh, you're just writing, right? That's all you're doing. It's way more than meets the eye. But yeah, exactly.
But a lot of people also say, I hate to write. And I always say, that's music to my ears.
Yeah, right.
Because that means a job for me.
My hand will shoot right up. I'm here to help.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how many people think that, writing is an intolerable chore, that think that you can do it without effort, and shouldn't be rewarded for it.
Right. Yeah, one of my greatest victories was supporting what wasn't even my core job. The company acquired a small company, and my boss, who was the VP of software, said, why don't you support them, help them finish up their doc? And things moved along. We had some ups and downs. And then at the big dinner to release the software, the CTO at the top of the company comes around, and literally during his dinner speech, he was kind of there to congratulate them, looks around the room and says, I know why everyone else is in this room. Why is Sabahat here? And I literally said, well, document got released. It had documentation. You didn't hear complaints. That's what I did.
I love that. I can I steal that? Because I want to commit that to memory and use that.
We could have a list of snappy comebacks. Like, In Mad Magazine used to have those
Yeah, right.
snappy comebacks to funny
Jas-
comments.
Jasmine, if you ever schedule anything like that, if I could be invited, and if that's a paid event, I will pay. It's no problem. But I would love to be a part of that if that happens.
Excellent.
Yeah, the Collier's Magazine, if anybody's old enough to remember Collier's Magazine, used to run a series where every time they had an issue, there was a little column called The Perfect Squelch, in which they would, repeat one of these stories where somebody, had the perfect comeback.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. So yeah. So just continuing and thinking about Dolly and shaping those perceptions. These are some of the things that I apply and use every time I'm presenting or talking to others, writing about my team, that sort of thing. Is even though my documentation team is on paper and in accounting, it's a cost center, I will never talk about it or present information in a way that makes it sound like anything other than a profit center. I will not only rely on, I won't use cost cutting too much because I present the technical content we produce as company assets. The company paid for these things to be produced. They own these things. And if people might struggle with that concept, one of the things that I kind of tell them is, well, if someone were to steal this written content, our company can sue, right? It's intellectual property. It is something that is valuable. The company paid for it. It's theirs. They own it. And there's plenty of laws to protect these assets. And so that's the kind of language that I use. And it gets some eyebrows raised or, oh, hey, hadn't thought about that. But it's true. So whenever I'm presenting, I talk about here's what we've delivered and here's how it's tied into, right, the sales team understanding new features so they can sell more effectively, or we're helping train new hires in sales and marketing, right? I'm tying it always to revenue. Who's bringing in the money? So I'll talk about all these different things to really emphasize we're not just a cost center, we're actually helping contribute to the bottom line. We help bring in money too. Let's see. And yeah, I for number 2, following the money trail. If when I was working with a team or managing a team of tech writers, the only thing the company wanted us to produce were SOPs. One particular writer, even when tasked with oh, hey, we occasionally get to write release notes or other things that are end user facing or client or customer facing, he really just wanted to work on SOPs. And I said, okay, that's no problem, but let's make sure you're aligned with the revenue generators. So I said, make sure at least 50% of your workload is for the sales team or the marketing team. And that's what led into eventually him writing an SOP about that wiretapping process. And that really helped solidify our place. So seeing how the company brings in money and then supporting the money makers to help protect the team and prevent us from being siloed or buried or eliminated over time, to make sure that we had a place in the company and we're staying there. I made sure, okay, who's bringing in the money? Who can we, in whatever we're doing, how can we support that and make sure that, we're associated with that? And I might be writing some coattails, but I don't care if it protects my team. So I want to keep people around and keep them employed and keep them growing and they're in place. So who cares? Let's serve the company however we can. And then, yeah, for number 3, it's, relationships that are, if I can advocate even in just simple conversations and day to day, I'll do it. It's a little more grassroots or an organic, but hey, it works. They're especially with people who are newer in their careers that have never worked with a tech writer. actually kind of like that because it gives an opportunity to shape their perception. They don't have any bad habits or biases that I have to break through. And I could really show, the value and the way I can help and the way I can save them time or make it like just easier for them. So there's a UX designer that I'm working with now. English is not her first language. She does beautiful designs, but she's really shaky with English. And she was actually a little worried about asking me for help because, hey, we're all busy. And she didn't want to like burden me with extra tasks. But this is a way that I can grow this relationship. This is the way that I can help someone in their career. They're now going to continue and have knowledge of what it's like to work with a technical writer. And she's, wherever she goes after our company, she's going to have a perception of this is what a tech writer does. And this is how I can work with a tech writer. And that's, going to be positive and, kind of, a stone in a pond, right? That ripple effect, just kind of a long-term, advocating for our discipline, but also like in our company, just day to day. And then for shaping perceptions, I really toot my horn pretty loud for my team. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I've worked with enough people who are not afraid to take credit for your work. I've worked with plenty of people who will take what's written by a technical writer, take 80% of it, put, a fancy design over top, some additional illustrations, some marketing copy, and they're like, this is marketing collateral. And they don't give credit where credit is due. So when we publish something, I'm very loud about it because I want to put a timestamp on it. And I want to say, this is what we did. Like, if you use it elsewhere, no problem. But acknowledge that the tech writers produced it and we made this and it's for the company and it's not from somebody else. Like, we are contributing, right? This is our value. This is why we're here at the company. Also, it serves as just like, great job, team. Like, look at what we did. Like, just pride within like what we do and the quality of our work.
Well, it's plain that your marketing background has helped you a lot here.
Hopefully it's not too salesy. I do have to rein it in sometimes.
You could also argue it's your humanities background. I mean, it's about being good with words and language, knowing how to, that's part of the humanities, is learning how to speak persuasively as well. And as an essay. So it's not, marketing follows from humanities, I'd say. It is being able to speak eloquently.
I was lucky so I had my degree in history, and the number one question I was getting in school was, oh, you're going to be a teacher, period mark. Right? Like, it wasn't really a question. It was more of an assertion of a fact. And I really hadn't thought about it. I was simply interested in history in and of itself. What I didn't realize at the time is how much it would inform my current career, right? Which is researching, fact finding, looking for the correct source of truth, portraying information in a way that's accurate. Historians can get really fast and loose with what truly happened, or it relies on perception, interpretation. So learning the nuances, of history, I think has made me a better writer.
What aspect of history were you interested in?
I studied a lot for like turn of the century, World War I. That was really a pivotal time in Western history, and so I
sure was.
So I took a lot of my classes in that time period, and especially like German and Russian history. It just really, for whatever the reason, it seemed just so interesting, and the Russian literature too is some of my favorite.
I've recently just been reading A Peace to End All Peace. I don't know if you're familiar with that work. It's about basically the creation of the Middle East around the time of World War One.
I'm writing that down. That sounds really good. So, yeah, I believe. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I think, Jasmine, I don't want to go and use up too much time. I just have like little fiddly things at this point, which is use data to your advantage to help prove your point if you're being blocked from other people from building relationships. Use Google Analytics. There's an intranet platform called Confluence where you can see page views and who's accessed your information. And Google, if your company or organization uses Google for its software, then there's something called file activity, where you can track people who are looking and viewing your Google spreadsheets, your documents, your slides, and so forth. So you can actually track to make sure that people are reading it and the volume that they're reading it, and that can help build the case of, this is our value, the organization needs us, this is how many eyeballs are viewing what we put out there and what we publish. So to help bolster that argument. So yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of this. I'm so grateful for everyone's perspective. This was a really cathartic discussion for me because it normalizes, right, my experience and helps me feel like, okay, I'm not alone. There's a lot of things that I've struggled with that seems kind of universal for the discipline. So it helps strengthen my backbone quite a bit, and then gives me that energy, that boost, so that I can push forward and know that, okay, it's always going to be here. I should just be ready and make stronger arguments and be ready for what could come in the future. That's what I had.
Well, that's yes, wonderful.
Great meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the graphics here are very timely for what's going on with the storms that we're having.
Oh yeah. So I would say that.
Yeah, where did you find that wonderful picture of the Berkeley Hills?
I would say, as far as changes are concerned, it's that French expression plus ça change. A lot of stuff is the same, only different, if you know what I mean. They say history doesn't repeat it, but it rhymes. I've found that we keep developing technology, and we wind up automating the things that are easy to automate, and then they go away, sort of, and we spend most of our time on the things that can't be automated, and then somebody figures out how to automate them, and then instead of all just relaxing, we go and work harder on the next thing that we can't automate, and we just keep staying on the edge there, so we never get to relax.
Yeah, that's true. And I heard a good quote from another leader where they just casually chatting, and they said, it doesn't get easier. You climb your way, and you move up, but it's surprising, but it doesn't get easier. It gets harder, and you just have to get better at it. So I do take that to heart.
So I have a question for you, Victoria, or other managers on the team. I know I get anthropological or sociological about this, but how are you seeing, it seems like STC itself and our circles there aren't too many young people, to be frank. And some of the younger folks are either in content marketing or they turn up with, write the docs and things like that. how is it looking within teams that you manage? Do we have a new generation of tech writers coming up? How is the breakdown age-wise? What's going on?
I could say in the past 10 years, I have seen quite a few young people put their resume in for a lot of work. Or for positions for technical writing roles. I think some of the barriers, unfortunately, can be experience with a lot of complementary or necessary tools and software. So in order to do this role, exposure to APIs, working with developers, working with project management tools, this and that. I think those things really prevent a lot of young people from getting a foot in the door and getting started. I know for me, transitioning from marketing, copywriting to technical writing, I had to take extra classes at UC Riverside. I got certified, and I've been taking additional courses at Berkeley just to keep pace because I don't want to fall behind. And so I wonder if that might be something that kind of prevents newer generations, younger generations from entering the field.
All right. Jasmine is kind of new to this. We haven't got her set up to this yet, but one of the things we do is present our speakers with this now somewhat collectible Berkeley chapter mug. So we're going to present you with one of these. I don't know exactly how we're going to get it to you, but we are. It's hard to hand it to you over the over the screen, but I'll work with Jasmine and we'll figure out.
Absolutely.
Yes, I will use it with pride.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, those are going to be quite rare and collectible because the Berkeley chapter doesn't exist anymore. At least under that name.
But thank you, Victoria. Wonderful discussion as always. And just thank you so much for everything you brought and the conversation that you helped us lead us through. This was wonderful.
All right, I'm going to end the recording, but we don't have to stop. We don't have to stop talking. Well, I'm going to end the recording if I can find the right button.